The road racing season is well underway, and riders around the world are hanging up their muddy gravel bikes and wiping the dust from their race rigs. We at 99 Spokes also have been feeling the need for speed. So in this video, we've got 5 of our favorite race bikes for any budget. So whether you're on the market for your first value-priced bike or are prepared to take out a second mortgage on your home, we've got you covered. But before we share what those bikes are, let's real quick cover the criteria that we used when choosing them. First up, each of these bikes had to come from a reputable manufacturer that's easily available in most parts of the world and has a competitive presence in elite road cycling. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of great bikes in this category coming from less storied manufacturers, but for this video, we chose to stick with bikes from manufacturers that you'll likely see in the peloton at the Tour de France later next month. We've also, of course, tried to choose bikes that include features and components that set them apart in their given price category. That said, we also believe there's an immense amount of value in buying a bike from a local bike shop with professionals who will be there to support you through your cycling journey. For that reason, you'll see a mix of bikes coming from direct-to-consumer brands like Canyon, as well as more traditional business-to-consumer brands like Trek. And lastly, this is a big one. Keep in mind that there are dozens, maybe even hundreds of awesome bikes that we could have chosen for each category in this video. So if you think we missed the mark and we should have chosen something else, let us know why you think so in the comments. But please keep it respectful and nice. Remember that we too love bikes, and that's the only reason we make content like this. So with that out of the way, let's move on to our first category, which includes anything and everything under $2,500. The winner here, though, is the Trek Emonda ALR 5, which lists for $2,229. For this, you'll get an alloy frame paired with a carbon fork, keeping the weight impressively low, just barely over 20 pounds or 9 kilograms. The frame features sleek cable routing through the headset, which is rare on a bike at this price. And speaking of clean looks, the Emonda ALR frames also use Trek's invisible weld technology at the head tube, giving it the same clean look as a carbon frame. One thing you won't find on this bike is a wide tire clearance. This Emonda ALR tops out at just 28 millimeters, which is the narrowest clearance of any bike on our list. Now, one of the reasons why we chose the Emonda as the winner here is that Trek has gone ahead and used the exact same geometry, they call it H1.5 on this bike, as you'd find on the higher end carbon models, instead of watering down their more base level priced alloy bikes. And we think that's awesome. The 56cm frame has a 391mm reach, 563mm stack height, 410mm chainstays, and a steep 73.5-degree head tube angle, giving the bike the shortest wheelbase on our list at just 983mm. Next, let's talk part spec, which is highlighted by a 2x12 Shimano 105 drivetrain. Most bikes at this price and even beyond are spec'd with 11-speed cassettes, but with the ALR 5, you'll have the same gear range as the rest of the field. At the front of the bike, you'll find a traditional 2-piece Bontrager cockpit, but like I mentioned earlier, with headset cable routing for clean looks and improved aero. Sadly, the ALR 5 does not come fully tubeless ready. You will get some tubeless ready rims, but the wire bead Bontrager R1 tires will need to be replaced before you throw away those tubes for good. Road cycling, and specifically road racing, is a notoriously expensive sport. And that's why we think it's pretty dang cool that this Emonda has just about all you need to race at a relatively competitive level. We love the fact that you get the same geometry and nearly identical aesthetics as a higher end carbon bike, and those reliable components should last you a season or two before you have to replace them. Other great bikes worth checking out are the Cannondale CAD 13 and the carbon fiber Polygon Stratos S7. Now though, let's move on to our second price category of $2,500 to $4,000. Which goes to Giant's all-new TCR Advanced 2, which lists for $3,300. Giant claims that this 10th generation bike is lighter, stiffer, and more aerodynamic than any that came before it. These improvements come from new tubing shapes and a one-piece front triangle. The bike also features a slightly sloping top tube, which should not only make mounting and dismounting a bit easier, but also exposes more seat post for a slightly more compliant ride. The carbon frame also features clearance for up to 33mm tires, which might sound pretty dang wide on a race bike, but that's actually growing increasingly common, and you'll see that number come up a couple more times on this list. In terms of geometry, the Giant is a bit more on the aggressive side of the spectrum. Has a 393mm reach, 560mm stack height, and 73-degree head tube angle on the medium-large frame. This, combined with a short 410mm chainstays, gives the bike a wheelbase of 991mm. The TCR Advance 2 is the least expensive version that the TCR is sold in. But don't worry, you still get some pretty dang good components for that price. In terms of group set, you're actually going to be getting that same 2x12 Shimano 105 group set that we saw on the Trek. It also comes fully tubeless ready, with a pair of giant Gavia Course 1 tires wrapped around some giant PR2 rims with a 25mm profile. The cockpit is also a giant affair with a typical alloy bar and stem, but again, it does route those cables in through the headset and really does have a nice clean aero look at the front of the bike. In total, this new TCR definitely lives up to the bike's high performance reputation, and it's awesome to see this level of attention to detail available on a $3,300 bike. Two other worthy contenders at this price point are the Specialized Allay Sprint Comp and the Colnago V3 Disc 105. Our third category of $4,000 to $6,000 is where things really start to get competitive, because just about every major manufacturer makes a bike at this price point. But we did go ahead and give the win to the BMC Team Machine SLR2. Despite being nearly 5 years old now, the latest generation Team Machine is still winning races and hearts, and this $5,499 model hits the sweet spot of price and performance. The carbon fiber frame and fork use BMC's Tuned Compliance Concept, or TCC, to balance out the stiffness required for a performance race bike, as well as the comfort needed for long, high output days in the saddle. One of the biggest things you'll notice is the drop seat stays, which allow for more vertical compliance at the back of the bike. This is something that's usually only found on endurance bikes and gravel bikes, so it's cool to see this technology brought into the race scene. The Team Machine's geometry is also a bit less aggressive than some of the other bikes on this list. The 56cm frame has a reach of 392mm, a 565mm stack height, and a 72.3 degree head-tube angle. This gives the bike a wheelbase of 1000mm, even with the short 410mm chainstays. The bike also features relatively generous 30mm tire clearance, as well as BMC's signature stealth dropouts that may or may not actually increase aerodynamics, but they sure do look cool. Moving on to the part spec, as you'd imagine for a $5,500 bike, there is a lot of cool stuff to talk about here. Up first is the Shimano Ultegra Di2 group set, which is just one step below the highest end Dura-Ace components. You'll also get a pair of BMC XRD 522 wheels wrapped in Pirelli P0 tires. One of the few places that this SLR2 begins to show its age is at the front of the bike, where it lacks the fully internal headset cable routing that we're seeing on most newly released bikes. Instead, you get a traditional alloy bar and stem from BMC with the cables entering the frame on the side of the head tube. At the end of the day, the BMC Team Machine 2 has managed to stand the test of time pretty well, and at a value that outcompetes most of its competitors. That said, its age is still starting to show through in some areas, and we're guessing it's only a matter of time before we're treated to a revision. Like we mentioned earlier, there are dozens of worthwhile bikes at this price category, but two in particular that might be worth checking out are the unbelievably spec'd Lauf Utold Race Wireless and the Orbea Orca M30i Limited Power. We've made it to our second to last price category, which is $6,000 to $8,000. And it's here that you start to see some pretty unbelievable bikes that aren't all that much different from what you'd see your favorite riders racing on. But the winner is the Canyon Ultimate CF SLX9 Di2, which lists for $6,999 and weighs a UCI illegal weight of 14.9 pounds or 6.6 kilograms. One of the things helping keep the weight so low is the SLX moniker in the name, which represents the fact that this frame uses a special high mod carbon fiber that has a higher strength to weight ratio than their typical carbon layup. But it's not all weight savings here, because Canyon recognizes the need for both comfort and aerodynamics on a good high quality race bike. For that reason, you'll find features like a generous 33mm tire clearance and a frame shape co-created with the aerodynamic juggernaut Swiss side. Unsurprisingly, the geometry on the Ultimate is right in line with the other bikes on this list. It has a reach of 393mm, a 560mm stack height, and a 73.3 degree head tube angle on the size medium. At the back of the bike, you'll find some stubby 410mm chainstays, giving the bike a wheelbase of 988mm. Canyon is a direct-to-consumer manufacturer, and that often means that you can get a slightly higher part spec on a given bike at a given price than you could from some other manufacturers. And that's definitely the case with this bike here. The SLX9 version that we're looking at comes with Shimano's top-tier power meter-equipped Dura-Ace Di2 group set, which is something usually left for bikes costing thousands of dollars more. You'll also get a set of DT Swiss Arc 1100 carbon wheels, which are then wrapped in a pair of 25mm Schwalbe Pro 1 tires. At the front of the bike is Canyon's nifty carbon fiber CP0018 bar stem combo. Despite looking like a one-piece setup, the bar ends are actually detachable, allowing for 3 width options, all while keeping the cabling fully hidden throughout. Say what you will about direct-to-consumer brands, there's no denying that Canyon is on the cutting edge of performance cycling, both with their team as well as with their bike, like this Ultimate SLX9. And it's pretty cool that elite riders on a budget can go ahead and get a bike like this for just $7,000 and have everything that they need to compete on essentially a UCI level. Now, 2 other bikes that you might want to consider at this price point are the Scott Addicts RC10 and the Merida Sculptura 8000. Our 5th and final price category includes anything and everything over $8,000. And while it was tempting to go ahead and choose something like the $25,000 Colnago C68, we reined ourselves in with a much more modest $15,000 S-Works Tarmac SL8 LTD. The goal of the latest Tarmac was to make something as light as their dedicated climbing bike, the Athos, but also as aerodynamic as their aero bike, the Venge. And according to Specialized, they pulled it off. They claim that the SL8 is 15% lighter and 6% more compliant than the SL7, with enough aero improvements to make it 16.6 seconds faster over 40 kilometers. Similar to that Canyon we mentioned earlier, this S-Works version of the SL8 uses a different high mod carbon that further reduces weight while also increasing vertical stiffness. All this results in a complete bike that weighs less than the UCI limit at just 14.9 pounds or 6.8 kilograms. Interestingly, the geometry on the new Tarmac is actually a little bit more relaxed than most race bikes. The reach on a 56cm frame is at 393mm. That's paired with a 573mm stack height, giving it the highest stacked reach ratio of any bike on this list. It also has a 73.5 degree head tube angle and 410mm chain stays, giving it a wheelbase of 991mm. As you'd imagine, Specialized has held nothing back on their flagship race bike. This particular limited edition model gets SRAM's all-new red group set, featuring a Quarq power meter and the lightest hydraulic disc brakes ever made. You'll also get a Roval Rapide CLX2 wheel set wrapped in 26mm S-Works Turbo Rapid Air tires. Lastly, at the front of the bike is the Roval Rapide integrated carbon cockpit that, again like Canyon, keeps cabling completely out of sight. Another neat perk included with this top-tier build is the inclusion of a Hammerhead Karoo 3 computer. Sounds neat, right? But the only drawback is that Specialized is only going to be making 300 of these bikes, so you better act fast if you want one. But don't worry, if you miss out on that opportunity, there are still plenty of other very expensive bikes that you can get your hand on. Our 2 runner-ups come from 2 of the winningest manufacturers in modern cycling, and that's the Cervelo R5 Dura-Ace Di2 and the Colnago C68 with, you guessed it, Dura-Ace Di2. And with that, we are done with our top 5 race bikes for any budget. Now, if you liked this video or found it helpful, go ahead and leave a thumbs up. If you disagreed with any of the bikes we had on here, then you can let us know why in the comments. And lastly, please, as always, remember that bikes are for everyone. Have fun out there.